Travel with us to Ecuador and learn why it's the place for you to go teach English. The quality of life, cost of living, and personal finances are said to be some of the best for those who want to live and teach abroad. Located in South America, Ecuador is named after the equator, which runs through the country. It is in fact the only country in the world officially named after a geographical feature. Ecuador is an expanding circle country, so English is taught as a foreign language. It is estimated that there were 225,000 speakers of English in Ecuador as of 2010, most of whom are located in the capital, Quito. Ecuador's official language is Spanish, spoken by 93% of the population, but Quechua, an Inca language, is spoken by the indigenous population and is the language of intercultural relations. 4.1% of people can speak it. Besides Spanish, 10 native languages are spoken in Ecuador by 0.7% of its population, and 2.2% of people speak foreign languages, English being the most spoken foreign language amongst tourist providers and professionals. English became mandatory in secondary schools in 1992. Known as the Cradle Project, which stands for Curriculum Reform aimed at the development of the learning of English, it was launched to reform the English curriculum in public and semi-public schools. The Cradle Project did not cover intercultural bilingual schools learning English because they are already bilingual schools in the local language and Spanish. Later officials of the National Directorate of Intercultural Bilingual Education felt the flexibility of the bilingual intercultural curriculum would allow the teaching of classes in other languages, and in English in particular. The English language is in high demand among indigenous populations, as they feel that their own languages are not held in high esteem, and that is disadvantageous to their children. This stems from a feeling that those who speak Spanish and English are elite bilinguals, while those who speak a local language and Spanish are minoritized bilinguals. The Ministry of Education has published guidelines specifically for English teachers on preparing lesson plans and relating lessons to learning objectives for the class, term, and year. These guidelines promote a communicative approach. Many teachers claim to use communicative and natural approaches. The grammar translation method was the method most used in classroom observations, but realistically, day-to-day, lessons were found to be largely teacher-centered with virtually no class participation. The Ministry of Education also designed the National English Curriculum Guidelines based on the CEFR, or Common European Framework of Reference, which is an international standard for describing language ability and is used around the world to describe language learner skills. Both public and private institutes must follow a set program and have government authorization. The National English Curriculum Guidelines made English optional for 2nd to 7th grade and mandatory for 5 lessons a week, lasting 45 minutes to 1 hour from 8th grade. Hoping to achieve A1 or beginner status in 8th to 9th grade, A2 or elementary status in 10th grade, and B1 or intermediate status in 11th to 12th grade. The aim was to ensure that secondary graduates reached a minimum of the B1 level. Initially, this seemed like a good idea, but B1 English is not usually efficient for the SAT and for entry to top universities in English-speaking countries, meaning that scholarships were likely to benefit only students that were able to reach additional means, such as private lessons. This excluded students who couldn't afford them, so currently, as of 2016, English is compulsory from 2nd grade, with the aim of getting all students to B2 by high school. As in most Latin American countries, English language training tends to be higher quality in private schools, reflecting smaller class sizes and more resources. Private schools often include bilingual international schools that offer English, French, or other languages as the primary medium of instruction. Many of these schools offer study abroad at secondary level as immersive linguistic and cultural experiences. The teachers are also better trained and have a higher level of English. In contrast, less than 1% of public school English teachers are at a B2 level, so it is safe to say that there is a socioeconomic divide in English language learning outcomes, as the majority of private pupils are from high-income families. That being said, the demand for private schools is high, since according to a local newspaper, there were 300 private English schools in Quito alone as of 2014. Ecuadorians are most likely to have studied English at school. 63% of English learners had studied the language at secondary school or high school, while 61% had studied at undergraduate level, and 43% had studied at primary or elementary school. Around a third of respondents had studied at a private English school, however, very few had learned English overseas or as part of a government-funded program. Based on Ecuadorians' IELTS and TOEFL results between 2012 and 2014, English proficiency is at a low to medium level, approximately equivalent to the B2 in the CEFR. Most English learners surveyed felt that their reading and listening skills were stronger than their writing and speaking, but half of them blamed themselves, citing that they did not speak or read English frequently enough, and that was the reason for their weakness. Others who felt good about their reading skills felt that's due to their own efforts as opposed to their teacher or education. They felt the same way about their writing and looked at themselves for not practicing enough. The people who felt confident in having advanced and fluent speaking and listening skills said that it was due to social and cultural factors, such as watching English language films and television, listening to music with English lyrics, and speaking English with friends and at work. If Ecuadorians don't need English in daily life, what motivates them to learn? Most major motivations for learning English relate to education and employment. More than half of those surveyed had learned English because it was mandatory during secondary school, while more than a third had learned because it was mandatory during primary school. Others had learned because it was necessary for university, and over 50% of Ecuadorians would be motivated to learn English if they knew it would improve their employment prospects. Large numbers were also motivated by more personal factors, such as intercultural interaction, being able to travel abroad or immigrate, to improve social status, or quality of life, to enjoy films or television programs and music in English, or to find more information online. The most significant reasons for not learning English were related closely to cost and access to public provision. Some challenges in public education reported problems with English language learning, including large class sizes for up to 50 or 60 students, a lack of space, which impedes group work, and poorly trained and unqualified teachers. In addition, there is concern that the language requirement being set for teachers B2 is not high enough to ensure effective English language learning. A 2014 letter to the Ministry of Education recommended starting English lessons in first grade and progressing to all content English lessons by 12th grade, as well as raising the language requirement for English teachers in secondary schools to C1. We will see if these changes are put into place in the future. Another challenge is that in an attempt to preserve Ecuadorian industry, the country is now relying increasingly on Ecuadorian-made items and local human capital. The government wants to use Ecuadorians to teach, but to prevent too much money leaving the country, the government has implemented a 5% tax on funds going out of the country. This presents a potential barrier for future English teachers to study abroad, as it can become even more expensive, so this is exacerbating the existing shortage of properly qualified English language teachers. A recent issue affecting teachers is that the National Union of Educators was dissolved in 2016 due to being accused of failing to comply to government regulations. It had been active for 72 years. As of this year, there is no union in place. On a positive note, the government has made it very clear that education is a priority, and this has been recognized, accepted, and applauded by the public. Policies and reforms have highlighted education as a means of helping Ecuador develop equality, solidarity, and multiculturalism, as well as the skills needed to directly benefit the country's economy and improve well-being. Education is now seen as an important investment in the country's future. Come to Ecuador and be part of all the exciting changes happening in English education. Bienvenidos y esperamos que nos vemos pronto.